Hey, welcome to the new channel. This is the wrestling channel for the nerds.
If anyone who doesn't know about our primary channel, Genesis of Androzani, I have been doing for the last 5 years, and I've done a whole bunch of things like Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, Marvel, Pink Floyd, X-Men, Spider-Man, and a whole bunch of other stuff.
But those ones are unlisted because they're shit. Because those are some stocky reviews. Those were 4 years ago. Bloody hell.
And throughout the Genesis of Androzani channel, we have made a few references to wrestling here and there. Probably one of my favorite ones was in the Colony and Space review I did with Adam. We referred to Hulk Hogan and Brutus.
You know what's so funny about that? That was when I first learned that you two were like into wrestling. Because I was a fan at the time watching those videos. And when I listened to that for the first time, I was like, oh my god, they're just like me.
Yes, you absolute mark. Anyway, I'm a long-time fan. I got exposed to it. I went to... So you know how you guys have things called Comic-Cons, right? Well, the New Zealand equivalent of that is called Armageddon Expo. And I went to an Armageddon Expo in, I think it was either 2006 or 2007, something like that. And I saw it live. I saw Impact Pro Wrestling live, and I was like, what is this? And immediately my friend's dad explained to me, it's like amateur wrestling, but it's not real. and I was like, okay, so I was exposed to kayfabe from literally day one. I knew about kayfabe from day one. But I remember that, and then my friend Luke, he had SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 on his PS2. And that's when I really, really understood, oh, so that's what this is. And then a couple of years after that, my dad got what's called My Sky, which is kind of like, it's back in like the late 2000s when you could record stuff that was on, well, Americans would call it cable television or satellite television. I don't know what you call it in the UK, but you have Sky in the UK, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in Aussie they call it Foxtel. But they got, in 2009, my dad got what's called My Sky, which is like Sky, but where you can record and watch it. I guess in America you call it DVR. And that's when I watched it every week from like September 2009 up till, I think it was, oh god, it's got to be like when Jinder won the belt in 2017. That's when I broke. Oh, that's when I shattered.
That's when I was like proper watching at the time.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
And then a little thing called All Elite Wrestling happened. And a little man called Phillip Brooks appeared on an episode of Rampage in 2021, and that's what hooked me back in. And I was into it fully for about a year, and then Mr. Phil had a little tantrum and pushed me. He pushed me away, relatively speaking, for another 9 months or so. And then Mr. Phil came back again recently to throw another tantrum. So, and here we are. So I, for the record, I lived through, like, watching the show live as it happens. I watched the show as he retired Jeff Hardy out of WWE in 2009, and then he did this Radio Society, and then I watched the pipe bomb live when it happened. Like, that was fucking... And also, not only was it, like, gobsmacking, but I was 13 years old when that happened. As a 13-year-old, that was crazy to witness. And, yeah, so Pepsi Phil, as Oobly Jubilee said in the comments, has had a big impact on my time, I guess you could say. Because I only lasted 3 years after he quit. It took me 3 years to finally go, fuck this, I'm out.
You know what's so funny? Like, for me personally, I started in 2014, but in October, September time.
So you started when he did the infamous podcast is when you started.
Yeah, it was like just before, and I didn't realize he did that until like probably like a year or so later or something. Because because how I got into wrestling was because I knew about wrestling, kind of. I knew what WWE was, but I only properly started getting into it after I watched a Sky made or maybe it was made by WWE, but it was just put on Sky, of a documentary on the European Championship of all things.
What?
I remember specifically, it was during the time where either Shawn Michaels or Triple H were holding it, and then they did the infamous like fake pin where they switched titles because Sergeant Slaughter wanted them to face each other in a match for it.
Right.
I don't know if anybody. I feel like that was the thing, and I remember that it was like in the 90s or something.
Yeah, yeah.
They were European champion. Yeah, I have vague memories of watching a documentary on that because Renee Young and oh god, what's his name? He passed away. He did the interviews in the 80s.
Oh, Mean Gene Okerlund.
Mean Gene, there you go. Yeah, I remember they were the presenters for that documentary. If anybody remembers what that documentary was, let me know, man. But yeah, I then watched from late 2014, and pretty much still have, other than like a year during the pandemic. Till now.
Oh yeah, no. Oh, those shows were rough. Those shows were
rough years. Those were some really rough years, and I wasn't to know. Really, I was, I was watching Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins in Hell in a Cell, which arguably actually was a pretty decent program, to be fair, at the time.
I just got a question though. Were you just like really confused when all these crowds were chanting CM Punk, and you were like, who the fuck is this?
I don't remember any CM Punk chants at the time because I wasn't watching them live until like 2015, like middle of 2015. So I don't remember any like CM Punk chants until probably like 2016, maybe, I think.
Right. Because if you weren't watching them live, they're probably edited.
Probably, and I wasn't watching the whole shows anyway. I was looking at stuff.
I see.
Like the main event of the one thing I do remember, like my biggest in terms of like WWE Raw memory was the main event of Raw before Hell in a Cell 2014. Where I remember the cage coming down and Seth Rollins like attacked Randy Orton and stood on top of the Hell in the Cell cage to end the show. I remember that. That's probably like my first proper Raw memory.
Yeah,
is what I remember. And then since then, I've been watching on and off.
See, I also have my other story is what I've watched outside of that, what we've already described. The first thing is when the WWE Network came to New Zealand in summer of it'd be winter for us, but like August 2014. You know, when they changed the logo, it was around then.
Make it cleaner.
Yeah, over the next 2 years after that, I watched every NWA, WCW, and WWF pay-per-view from Starrcade 83 up to King of the Ring 1994. So I watched a lot of old stuff. I also have been exposed to stuff from like Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression as well. And I think that I remember watching Wrestle Kingdom 9, 10, and 11 when they aired. So that would have been 15, 16, and 17. Yeah, I remember seeing those as well.
I think I watched 2017 in bits and parts of wrestling.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's a little introduction to. Oh yes, TNA. I forgot about TNA. Fucking TNA. And so 2012, I watched
Everyone
TNA.
Forgets about TNA.
In 2012. I watched TNA for like 6 months, and this was when they were doing Joker Sting.
Oh god.
And like this was when Hogan was still there, and I remember it was when Bobby Roode was the champ and he had long hair. Yeah, that was my exposure to TNA. And also probably the biggest influence on me for wrestling is the video games. Like pretty much like the SmackDown versus Raw ones, and then like WWE 12, 13, then like 2K14. I think once it got to 2K15, I was like, oh. Oh no.
And again, that's when I started playing WWE video games.
Yeah.
And it's gotten better since then, kind of.
Yeah. Well, I just once they handed it over properly to 2K, I was just like, oh, this is just too different. Like it's
when you because like yeeted out in 2020.
I mean, there was a period of time where he was off YouTube because of a controversial thing he did in his personal life, but I've always been a huge fan of Adam Blompier's content since day one. I remember finding him literally the first ever video he put on What Culture in 2015. I remember seeing it like the week it aired, and I was like, this guy's different.
Yeah, same. I was, and that I felt because that was the exact time when I started watching. So when or when What Culture and Blompier, that was when they started to really shine on the YouTube space.
And I would say
What Culture Pro Wrestling was made, and that was the only 2 shows in wrestling I've ever been to live, were the 2 London What Culture Pro Wrestling shows, where I actually saw Blompier in the second one, at least.
Yes. I went to WWE Live in 2016. I got to see John Cena versus AJ Styles. I got to see Reigns versus Rollins. I got to see Chris Jericho cut a promo on my city. He said that Auckland was the anus of New Zealand. And I got to see Sheamus slap his ass at us. Yeah, I remember we all said the highlight of the show was Balor versus Jericho. 100%.
That would be a fun match in 2016.
16, yeah. Yeah, like the Cena Styles, Reigns, Rollins, and Sasha Charlotte, it was very obvious that this was just the match that they've been doing at every show, and it was just so... I was like, okay, I've seen this before. Like, I've seen everything they do in this match before. It was very safe. But Balor Jericho was great. That was the highlight, because it had a promo before the match as well. And it was, that was great. But funnily enough, you are going to a live show later this year, which is very exciting. You're going to Wembley Stadium for AEW All In. I am. That's going to be fucking crazy.
Got my £200 worth of ticket. It's expensive, but oh well. I wanted to go, and I'm going, and it's going to be really fucking fun.
Yep.
Brilliant. I'm going to get to see Punk live.
Yep.
For the first time ever.
Probably.
Sting.
Yep. If
Kenny Omega probably. I'm actually pretty fucking excited.
Depending on how bad the arm injury is, you might get to see Bryan Danielson as well.
It's a stretch, but it's a month and a half away. It's 8 weeks away, so
it's possible.
Possible.
You might be able to wear a cast.
Maybe. Hopefully, the injury isn't as bad as they think it is.
Anyway. I mean, Cowboy Bob Orton wore a cast for many matches, but that was in the 80s when they just work broken all the time. But yes, no, I have a very extensive knowledge of a lot, because around, like, when I was a fan, I was so obsessed with it that I did, like, insane amounts of research, and I'm like that with everything. As anyone has known, if anyone has seen the content I've done on the main channel, and you look at anything that's one of my interests, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, Pink Floyd, like anything like that, I know a lot about it, because I've done an extensive amount of research, and wrestling is no different. I know a lot about wrestling. I've seen a lot of matches. I've seen a lot of great matches. I've seen a lot of garbage matches. Yeah, I do have a few blind spots, as you do. I mean, I think out of all the interests I have, it is the thing that has the highest volume of content, because it's literally, it's multiple times a week, every year for the past, like, well, I guess it's been on television since like the 50s, but it's been competed since like the 1910s or something ridiculous like that, before World War One, and it's never stopped, and it's never going to stop. The carny
never ever stop.
The carnies will make money until the earth burns. Anyway, so that's the introduction out the way. Now you know something about us. My name's Connor. This is Callum, by the way, if anyone didn't know.
Hi.